MedShield Medical Scheme, we don't just talk health, we do health. SMS MedShield to 33023 or talk to your broker to get your kind of care.
Chileans might have to stay indoors this summer as experts warn that the country will be blasted by extremely high levels of ultraviolet radiation. According to a study from Chile's National Cancer Corporation, or CONAC, the massive hole in the ozone layer above Antarctica is moving closer towards the South American country. CONAC's Dr. Ernesto Gramsch says the rise in radiation levels is alarming.
In
October, UV levels were 17% higher than they were in October of last year, which was 10 or 15% higher than the year before that. So this year, it's been a little higher, almost 30% higher than in previous years.
Gramsch says that rise is also due to shifts in climatic wind patterns, which have thinned out ozone gases over Chile in recent years. And with less protection from harmful UV rays, the number of skin cancer cases are on the rise. Dr. Cecilia Orlandi says she has seen the number of patients double since 2000.
The number of skin cancer cases have been increasing, which, yes, we can detect at a fairly early stage. But cancers from epithelioma basal cells and squamous cells have been increasing as well, and those are directly related to exposure to ultraviolet rays A and B.
Outside, Chileans are bracing for a harsh summer.
Now the sun just burns. It doesn't warm you up, it just burns.
You feel it because your face burns and your skin is more sensitive.
But according to a recent United Nations report, a ray of hope is slowly emerging. Moves to tackle climate change have resulted in the ozone layer finally starting to recover, with estimates that it will be back at 1980 levels by 2050.
South Africa has the second highest incidence of skin cancer in the world, this after Australia. Now, the Skin Cancer Foundation says that South Africans are diagnosed every year with the highest rate of melanoma skin cancer in the world. Every year, there are about 20,000 reported cases and 700 deaths from skin cancer. So today we focus on skin cancer and tackle questions such as, what causes skin cancer and who's at risk? Can it be prevented, and if so, how? How does one screen for it? Is it curable? Joining me in this discussion is an expert panel consisting of a specialist dermatologist, a doctor from the Department of Biochemistry at the University of Stellenbosch, a health specialist from the CANSA Association of South Africa. So sit back, relax, and learn from this exciting show ahead. You can tweet us as always at SABC Health Talk, or simply interact with us on our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk. I'm Dr. Seloma Daung, and this is Health Talk.
Every year, 12 million people worldwide hear the words, "You have cancer." The Cancer Association of South Africa, CANSA, is there to help and support not only the person who has been diagnosed with cancer, but also the friends, loved ones, and caregivers of those affected by cancer.
PhotoFinder is a mole analyzing device that checks for the early warning signs of skin cancer. This test is performed by a registered nurse and takes about 10 to 15 minutes, depending on the amount of moles found, as well as the questions asked by the client.
This is the PhotoFinder dermoscope. As you can see here, it is the camera portion of the PhotoFinder dermoscope, and this PhotoFinder dermoscope has the unique ability to distinguish between melanocytic moles and benign moles. In other words, it can pick up if there's any melanoma cells in any mole, so it's specifically a mole analyzer, not any other skin lesion it will analyze. It's only for mole analysis.
The Cancer Association of South Africa, CANSA, manages 8 mobile health units which travel to communities across the country and also reach people in remote areas. These mobile units offer much needed assistance for early detection of cancer. CANSA's mobile units are equipped to provide essential health training, education, and cancer screening tests. The mobile units help women to detect cancer at an early stage by using pap smear tests to detect cervical cancer and breast examinations. Both these two tests have been successful in reducing the death rate from these cancers. The mobile units also do prostate-specific antigens, or PSA, tests for men to detect prostate cancer and skin examinations to detect skin cancer.
I am here this morning with my daughter, Monita, and my daughter-in-law, Santi. Actually, I brought them here this morning so we can have a screening of the breast. I lost a husband 4 years ago due to cancer, which was not detected and we were not aware of it. About a year ago, I attended one of these CANSA mobile units where I had myself tested and they found out that I had a lump. And that lump was a fibroid, lucky it was not cancer. That is why I urge all women, whoever you are, the minute you see this mobile, please go to them. They'll do your test for you and you'll find out. I always believe that prevention is better than cure.
Prevention will always be better than cure. But now, to learn more about skin cancer and what this is about, it's a great pleasure for me to welcome in our Johannesburg studio my two special guests. First up is Dr. Ishad Esak, who's a specialist dermatologist based in Johannesburg at the Mayo Clinic, the Linksfield Clinic. And yeah, welcome to Health Talk.
Thank you for having me on your show.
All right. And as always, our regular guest, Professor Michael Herbst, a health specialist from the Cancer Association of South Africa. Welcome to Health Talk once again.
Thank you to be with you again.
All right. Dr. Isak, let's start with you. You know, oftentimes people talk cancer, but there's certain terminology that, you know, people sometimes may not be aware of. Could you perhaps just take us through what a tumor is? You know, you often hear about a tumor, a benign tumor, malignant tumor. Let's get these definitions out of the way.
I think it's important to understand that the word tumor is more or less a medical term for a growth, put very simply.
Right.
And you will get growths that have got more aggressive or difficult behavior. Those would be regarded as the so-called malignant ones.
Yeah.
They tend to cause a lot more damage, and they have the ability to spread elsewhere and cause further damage to other organs away from the site from where they actually started.
All right.
Whereas a benign tumor or a benign growth is more or less a growth that occurs out of the tissues in that particular area.
Right.
They tend to be more localized in that particular area, and they tend to have behavior very similar to the tissue or the cells from which they arise.
Okay.
So a benign growth is something you'd more or less accept, whereas a malignant growth or a malignant tumor is something you need to treat aggressively.
Yeah. If we have time, we may come back to specific examples, but let's focus now on cancer. So when we say cancer, particularly skin cancer, what are we talking about?
In the situation of skin cancer, you must remember that in the skin you have got different layers with different cells that make up the skin.
Right.
And you can essentially develop a skin cancer from any part of the skin. Now, most people only think about the outer part of the skin, but you can get skin cancer occurring from areas like the hair follicles, the sebaceous glands, the sweat glands, the connective tissue that actually make up the skin itself, the vessels in the skin can all result in skin cancer, one way or the other. But those types of skin cancer are relatively rare.
Right.
I think for the purpose of this discussion, we should mainly focus upon the skin cancers that occur out of the outermost layer of the skin.
Right.
Because
those are the ones that people see.
That's the ones that people are going to see.
Okay.
But these type of skin cancers occur largely out of sun damage over the years.
Right.
And the two main categories that we'll be looking at from the sun-induced skin cancers would be the melanoma group and the non-melanoma group.
All right. We're going to come back to those ones. Prof, let's perhaps just understand, I mean, Cancer Association of South Africa, you keep registries, if you do, or at least statistics. You can enlighten us on statistics. How common is skin cancer in South Africa?
Yes, so the statistics that I'll be giving you do not come from the Cancer Association.
Sure.
It comes from the National Cancer Registry, and it's a bit outdated.
Right.
Our latest stats are only for 2011.
Right.
And yes, we have around about 20,000 cases of skin cancer diagnosed every year.
Right.
And of that, about 14,000 will be basal cell carcinoma.
Right.
About 6,000 will be squamous cell carcinoma. And anything between 1,500 and 2,000 will be the melanomas.
Melanomas. Okay. Let's get back to you, Dr. Isaac. Now, we've had different types of skin cancers as explained. Now, could you then just take us through common signs and symptoms? What is it that people see that can say to them or suggest to them that this is skin cancer?
To make things very simple, if you look at melanoma, melanoma usually occurs as a small black dot. It could be in the context of a patient who's got many moles, but you're essentially looking for that ugly duckling, that one mole that looks a bit different and out of context and out of place of the rest of the moles.
Well, this is quite important, because you see, many people have all different type of spots on their skins. So what we're saying is, not all spots are cancer. But how can people see that, well, this one is cancer, this one I must be happy about?
Well, the important things to look at is, like I said, that ugly duckling or that unique mole, the one that's behaving differently.
Yeah.
But other important signs and symptoms that you can look out for is the so-called ABCD of skin cancer.
And we have the slide on our screen now, yeah, okay.
As your slide is pictured up there,
right,
you have asymmetry. So a mole that usually was roundish or oval then becomes asymmetrical, pointing out to some sort of growth occurring on one end that's not uniform throughout.
Right.
Then you can get border or changes. Irregularity of the border can also indicate something, for example, as a superficial spreading melanoma.
Right.
Color changes or color variation. Color variation can be anything between being very intensely pigmented or having lost pigment or having variation in the pigment within the same lesion itself. Then we're looking at diameter. So when looking at diameter, think about diameter, area, or size. Essentially, moles that are more than about 6 millimeters in size or diameter needs to be checked out a little bit more carefully. But a mole that's been relatively static in size or the same size for many years and now begins to increase in diameter, that's something you need to be wary about.
What about if it's been there and it's been more than 6 millimeters throughout?
If it's been there and more than 6 millimeters throughout, you've got to look at the other criteria or the other suggestive features in that context. So size itself may not be a criteria, but look at all the other A, B, C, D, E criteria. Then an evolving mole, a mole that's changing in any way. It may be itchy, it may be becoming more dome-shaped and elevated. And then you look at, if you want to add to that A, B, C, D, E guide, you can add F and G as fast growing. So a dot that was relatively static and now is beginning to grow fast, that also needs to be checked out. Now those features that I just discussed are mainly those for the melanoma cancers. The other important thing to look out for is a dot that was not there before, because melanoma can occur out of a pre-existing mole. But the other commoner pathway for the development of melanoma is where a melanoma will develop out of a single melanocyte. Now, a melanocyte is that cell in the outer layer of the skin that is responsible for producing pigment and color to the skin. And melanoma can occur out of a single cell that's been damaged, unable to repair itself, and thereafter develops into a full-blown melanoma.
Okay. Prof, let's look at the impact of skin cancer. I mean, just now you mentioned that well, first of all, the statistics, may be outdated. And you mentioned that there's a couple of deaths, from the cases that are reported. The impact that skin cancer is having in our country, generally.
Well, it definitely has an impact. I think a major part of the impact is the emotional side of it. If somebody's diagnosed, when somebody hears the word, you have cancer, to them this is a death sentence.
Right.
And as far as the non-melanoma skin cancers are concerned, they're very treatable, and our dermatologist friend here will be able to confirm that for us. So, but diagnosis should be made early, and treatment should be instituted as early as possible to limit the real after effects of non-treated
I know
skin
this is why we're doing this program, but I mean, is that level of awareness adequate in our society?
Unfortunately not, you see, because there is this myth that skin cancer is only a white person's disease, which is not really the case. I mean, we have people with dark skin tones in this country that die of the worst form, which is melanoma. And I think a good example, not of this country, but Bob Marley is a good example. And he got it in a very strange place in his body, and that's funny about melanoma. He got it under a toenail, and the melanoma eventually killed him.
Talk about melanoma. Perhaps it's on this point that we go for a quick commercial break, and when we come back, we now focus on this deadly type of skin cancer called melanoma. Please stay with us.
Shield, embracing our members in good health since 1968.
It's so good, nothing else can replace just your slightest embrace. And if you only would be my own for the rest of my days, I will whisper this phrase, my darling, c'est bon.
If we're talking health, then let's talk seriously.
Welcome back. We're talking skin cancer, and then now we're focusing on melanoma. And with us, two special guests, Dr. Ishad Isak, a specialist dermatologist based in Johannesburg, and Professor Michael Herbst, health specialist from the Cancer Association of South Africa. We're talking about melanoma. Let's start with you, Prof. You said that there may be about 1,000 or so cases.
Yes.
But if we extrapolate now, because we're saying that this is probably not adequate, there could be a lot more than that cases.
I'm convinced there must be a lot more, because the latest statistics indicate that South Africa has even surpassed Australia, who usually had the highest incidence of melanoma.
Yeah.
And all the international literature now shows us that South Africa has surpassed Australia as far as that is concerned.
Okay.
And it's really a major concern to us.
Right. Let's try and define a little more, suppose make it a little easier for us to understand melanoma. We believe that, there's a difference between white skin and black skin. Just take us through that.
Essentially, if you look at melanoma, it occurs out of the, like I said, the melanocytes.
Yeah.
Now, a melanocyte is the cell that is responsible for protecting the skin against ultraviolet radiation and the sunlight itself.
Right.
Now, the difference essentially between a white-skinned person and a dark-skinned person is not the number of melanocytes that they actually have per square millimeter.
Right.
It is how much of pigment they actually produce.
Right.
Now,
although... What pigment?
The pigment is actually basically melanin.
Melanin, okay.
Now, the thing about melanoma is that melanoma occurs out of these particular cells. And with the continuous and regular sunlight insult on the skin, those cells then have the difficulty in repairing themselves, and then are not exactly sure how to replicate or to divide themselves.
Yeah.
And that's how they develop melanoma from there.
So is melanoma a type of cancer that is more common in darker skinned persons than lighter skinned persons? Is that fact or myth?
The melanoma in the sun-exposed areas is certainly more common amongst the fair-skinned population. However, there are certain types of melanoma, for example, the acral lentiginous melanoma and the subungual melanoma. Yeah. Acral lentiginous mainly occurring on the palms and the soles, and the subungual type is what Prof just mentioned regarding Bob Marley, is the one that occurs underneath the fingernails or underneath the toenails. Yeah. Those tend to be a lot more aggressive, and the mortalities with those are higher in the black population. So what happens is that you can get melanoma occurring in fair-skinned patients and in dark-skinned patients. Yeah. So it's not an exclusively a fair-skinned disease.
So who's at risk now? Talking specifically about melanoma, who's at risk of developing melanoma?
The risk factors for melanoma essentially is sun damage. So those who are exposed to the sunlight often, And in particular, the studies have shown that in melanoma, it is your intermittent high-dose sun exposure.
Right.
So in other words, that 1 or 2 holidays a year where you've ended up with a really bad sunburn, where you've blistered or you've peeled, that increases your risk of developing melanoma. Even if you develop the sunburn or the peeling episode as a child. The next risk factor is having a first-degree relative who's had melanoma. So there's 2 schools of thought or 2 avenues in which you can actually weigh that into the equation. One, in a patient who's got a first-degree relative who's had melanoma, there may be a genetic predisposition for the other relative.
Yeah.
The second thing is that if you take an adult who's been indulging in negligent sun exposure patterns, it is assumed that the child who was with them on that particular recreational activity, whether it was the beach or a camping episode, you will find that that child, it is assumed, had the same negligent behavior as the parent. And it is thought that through that non-hereditary mechanism, that child then also becomes at a higher risk of the development of melanoma. So then you look at, if you look at high-dose UV exposure, tanning beds are also a real problem. And in most cases, you'll
these
find
are popular now. People go into these tanning beds in shopping malls and stuff. Huh?
Especially this time of the year, the young ladies who want to have a low-cut dress for prom. And we've tried to get the minister to ban sunbed use for children under the age of 18. But it's not a priority within the Department of Health at the moment. And it's really a pity.
It's sad, isn't it? Now, I mean, you mentioned sun-exposed areas, but certainly those ones that occur underneath, soles of feet, I mean, that's not really sun-exposed, isn't it?
For those particular times, we think that those patients carry a genetic risk.
Yeah.
And they also have got a problem in the checkpoint in the cell cycle. So when a cell begins to replicate, it undergoes several checkpoints along that replication process in order to ensure that the cell that is resulting is like the original cell. In these particular patients, we think that they have got a defective checkpoint where the program of the cell is not adequately proofread.
Yeah.
And the subsequent cell then becomes defective.
All right. So diagnosis in these, I would imagine, might be a bit difficult, isn't that so, Prof?
It can be difficult, but if one uses the right equipment, it is so much easier. And there is an apparatus, it's called a dermoscope. And my organization uses the photo finder dermoscope, and we take it down to the beach at times so people can look out on the beaches even this summer.
Right.
And it's wonderful. It gives you an accurate picture. It can store the picture. If you go back for a checkup again a few months later, you can have a comparison. And that is where the ABCDEFG really comes in beautifully, because you can see changes evolving, fast growing, developing, diameter increase, all these things. It's wonderful then to really have that equipment available.
Melanoma is said to be a devastating and very aggressive type of cancer. Your comment?
Melanoma, like we've just heard, it certainly can be lethal. The problem with melanoma is usually the late diagnosis. You'll find that melanoma is readily and easily treatable in its early stages. Usually surgical resection or surgical removal with an extra rim of skin around the lesion, in majority of cases can cure the patient. It is the late diagnoses and the late presentations that actually give us the problems. By that time, you'll find melanoma tends to spread either via the lymphatics, which is a type of vessel system in the skin, or it may even get access to the blood vessels, and even worse, via that blood spread can essentially end up in any other organ. And that's where most of our problems actually occurs, and that's where the majority of the mortality actually is.
We hear about some slow-growing cancers, some fast-growing cancers. Where would you put melanoma?
Melanoma is very unpredictable. You can get some patients with melanoma that remains in its early stages for years and then begins to become rampant. You have those patients who present to you with a spouse or a partner mentioning to you, but that spot wasn't there 4 weeks ago. And when you investigate the patient, you'll find that the melanoma has already become quite rampant and has spread elsewhere. So melanoma is very unpredictable, which is why the screening campaigns need to be stepped up. and which is why patients who have been diagnosed with the problem maintain their surveillance protocols, because that is where you end up picking up problems early. And like you mentioned at the very beginning, the screening and the prevention is where it's at. By the time we get to treatment in late-stage melanoma, there are drugs that are available to treat it. However, they are very expensive. You'll find the medical aids are very resistant to approve of their use, and you'll find that they tend not to prolong life for very much longer after the stage 4, for example, diagnosis has been made.
Yeah.
So you want to catch this very, very early, and better still, you want to prevent it altogether.
Yeah, so I think that's the last positive statement I want to take from you, that you prevent it and rather catch it early. Right. Time for another quick commercial break. After the break, we now focus on risk factors for skin cancer. Please stay with us.
MedShield Medical Scheme doesn't just cover you when you're ill, we'll help you stay well.
Animation, virtual reality and games. We have all of that and other technology and social media news.
I've got the full version of the game at home, so I play it a lot at home.
We also tell you how Africans are using tech to improve their lives.
We have to close the digital gap.
So join us on Network for your African technology and social media news. That's Network with Ms. Phumelele Zondi every Sunday at 7:30 p.m. Central African Time.
MedShield Medical Scheme, we don't just talk health, we do health.
Welcome back. We're talking skin cancer with Dr. Ishad Isak, a specialist dermatologist based in Johannesburg, and Professor Michael Herbst from the Cancer Association of South Africa. Okay, we've spoken a lot about, causes and risk factors. I think I'd like us to use this just to crystallize this and put it nicely, because, obviously we've been talking a whole lot of things about, what cancer is and so on. Let's start with genetic cancers, and let's look at the wide spectrum of cancers. Okay, who is at risk in terms of genetics?
From a genetic point of view, you may find that there are certain groups of patients who have got a problem with developing skin cancer. If you take, for example, those who've got albinism, those particular patients have got a difficulty in producing normally functioning melanin, the pigment that protects you against sunlight damage, or they may lack the enzyme or the protein that produces the melanin completely. So they don't produce any protective pigment in their skin at all. And they are very, very prone to the development of particularly the non-melanoma skin cancers, the basal cell carcinomas, which Prof mentioned is very, very common, and the squamous cell carcinomas. In fact, a lot of these children present themselves very, very early at dermatological clinics with growths that either occur near the eyelid margin, on the nose, on the ears, and by the age of 6, 7, 8, 10 years old, probably have needed to undergo 3 or 4 or 5 surgical procedures to have these cancers removed, which is actually quite difficult for them. Genetically speaking, there's another group of patients called the xeroderma pigmentosa patients, and they have got a problem in not just the pigment itself, but they have got a problem in the repair process. So those cells in the outer part of the skin receive the sunlight insult and they become damaged, but they don't have the proteins to enable them to repair that damage. So the defect continues over and over again, and they end up having a similar prognosis or a progression of disease as those who've got albinism. And then, like I said, the genetic factors, you may find patients who've got a family history of having had melanoma, who then put their next generation, and even sometimes 2 or 3 generations down the line.
Is it only melanoma in that instance?
In majority of the cases, it's the melanoma that actually carries the genetic risk. For patients with squamous cell carcinoma and basal cell carcinoma, there are other syndromes, for example, basal cell nevus syndrome and Gorlin syndrome, where they've got a problem with the development of multiple basal cell carcinomas. In fact, sometimes so many that you've got to pick and choose which ones you need to cut out and
we
leave the balance behind.
You know, you remind me of something because we didn't really get time to describe all these different types of cancers. Just now you spoke about basal cell carcinoma. These are the sort of cancers that appear on the face, correct?
On the very sun-exposed parts of the body.
Right.
So it'll be hands and arms, the face, the ears, and very often people who've got thinning of their hair, you will even find it on the top of the scalp.
Right. And now we're talking about risk factors and we're talking the environment, which is important around this time of the year.
Absolutely.
Correct?
The sun in South Africa is our friend and yet it is our enemy. And what people very often think is that if they sit at the beach and they sit under an umbrella, that they're safe. But people forget that the ultraviolet rays can reflect from the water, and this is now also at the swimming pool. It can reflect from the surface of the water. It can reflect from the surface of the sand and the tiles and the surface around the swimming pool. So people are never really safe. So even if you sit under the umbrella, really cover yourself with a protective sunscreen.
Are there any particular times of the day where it's most dangerous, I suppose, or unwise to be exposed to the sun?
I think in our circumstance here, I think just before I get to that point, it's very, very important not to sit here and create paranoia about the sun.
Absolutely.
I think it's very, very important that we are South Africans. We live outdoors. We play soccer, cricket. We've got fantastic beaches. We shouldn't be fearing the sun, but we should be cautious in its use.
Right.
Coming back to your question regarding the time of day, I think anywhere between about 10 o'clock and about 2 or even 3 o'clock in summer, you should be a little bit more cautious and you should seek the shade. As a guide, if your shadow is shorter than your height, you should be in the shade.
Very interesting one. If your shadow is shorter than your height, you should be in the shade. Very interesting. Other factors. Food. Does that play a role, if any, at all, in the development of cancer?
Well, I think a balanced diet and good nutrition is important for general health and also for the health of the skin.
Right.
But I don't think that there's anything that we can necessarily take in by mouth that will give you additional protection against ultraviolet radiation.
People have, because I want us to dispel any myths that may be there around, food and vitamins. You hear stories around, no, if you lack certain vitamins, you may be at risk of developing skin cancer. Dr. Isa?
I don't think there's any conclusive or substantive studies that have shown that an inclusion diet, in other words, adding something to your diet, or exclusion diet, removing something from your diet, is going to be of any particular advantage in the context of skin cancer. Yes, with other cancers, but not really with skin cancer.
Yeah, all right. And of course, awareness and access to information. I mean, how can people access information, on...
Well, if they want to access the Cancer Association of South Africa, we have a toll-free line, 0800 22 6622, and they can also visit the website, which is www.cansa.org.za. And there are over 200 fact sheets available on the website, not only covering all the forms of skin cancer, but any of the other forms of cancer that we know about.
Okay, yeah. Well, I think we've dealt enough with the subject of causes and risk factors. It's time now to move on to prevention and perhaps treatment. After that, we're going to learn more about the association between Rooibos tea and skin cancer. Yes, Rooibos tea and skin cancer. Please stay with us.
Shield, embracing our members in good health since 1968.
16 of South Africa's celebrities were battling it out for 40 grand at the 5th annual Celebrity Cook-Off in Witbank.
We look forward to welcoming everybody to Emlahleni because this is the place of coal.
For a starter, I'll give you guys 45 minutes to prepare, and the main course will be 1 hour 30 minutes.
The team name is Iliquastas, the clever choices.
Yes! Maniora pizza.
3 Michelin stars.
Yes!
Like a niece, what do? Drum roll. Swaggy and the defending champions are the Michelin stars.
That's Trends Travel every Sunday, 12 to 1 p.m. on SABC News.
If we're talking health, then let's talk seriously.
Most parents know how painful a bad sunburn can be, but few are aware of the serious long-term health hazards of overexposure to the sun. Just 2 blistering sunburns could double your child's risk of skin cancer as an adult. There is, however, a bright, funky, sun-smart way to protect young skins from harmful ultraviolet radiation. A range of UV-resistant outdoor wear that'll reduce sunburn and help prevent sun-induced skin cancer. These colorful UV suits protect children both from direct sunlight and from the ultraviolet rays that penetrate most summer fabrics, including many beach umbrellas. UV suits also provide protection from ultraviolet radiation that reflects off sand and grass, posing a threat even in the shade. UV rays are invisible, can't be felt, and pass through clouds, making children especially vulnerable to sunburn on cool, overcast days. Ultraviolet rays penetrate water too, which is why UV suits are so sensible for swimming. Their vibrant colors make them easy to spot, while their specially formulated fabric is cool to wear and dries in no time. Kids should be kept out of the sun between 10 and 3, when UV radiation is at its most dangerous. And when they do play outside, on the beach, in the park, or at the pool, make sure they're wearing an approved UV-resistant suit. It could help prevent cancer. And don't forget the sunscreen, because all skin is precious.
All skin is precious indeed. Now, we're talking prevention of skin cancer, and of course we'll talk a little bit about treatment. And we're now joined from our Cape Town studio by Dr. Thandeka Unathi Maqwebeba, who's from the Department of Biochemistry at the University of Stellenbosch. Welcome to Health Talk, Dr. Maqwebeba.
Thank you, Doctor, and thank you for having me on your show.
All right. Earlier I spoke about, obviously we're talking skin cancer and we're talking prevention. And we believe that you have just published some article, or you've done some research that points to the fact that some of the herbal teas that we have in South Africa can actually help prevent skin cancer. Is that correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Tell us a bit about your research.
Okay. Basically, our study looked at how Rooibos extracts could prevent cancer development in a skin that is excessively exposed to the sun's UVB rays. And the basis for our study was on the fact that UVB is known to cause DNA damage in keratinocytes. And as it has been previously mentioned by Prof and Doctor, keratinocytes are mainly found on the outermost layer of the skin, which is the epidermis. And this is where you get your most frequently diagnosed non-melanoma skin cancers, which is basal cell carcinoma and squamous cell carcinoma. Now, if we go back to the DNA damage that is caused by UVB, it initiates cancer development in skin, and it does so by it allows the cells to multiply uncontrollably. And as a result, the keratinocytes are referred to as precancerous cells. The other thing that happens in the body when it is exposed to UVB light, in response to the damage, it induces inflammation. Now, this is a process that tries to eliminate or repair the damage that is caused by UV. But unfortunately, the inflammatory process can also contribute to cancer development in that it will allow, or it will rather accelerate the growth of the precancerous cells to grow into malignant tumors.
Right.
So we wanted then to see how Rooibos can prevent this process.
Right.
And what we did was we developed an inflammatory cell model using specific biomarkers, and we tested the Rooibos extracts against these biomarkers. And what we found was that Rooibos can prevent cancer development in skin by removing the DNA damaged cells. And in the process, it also blocks the onset of inflammation.
So in practical terms now, what would this be now? Direct application of the extract onto the skin or ingestion of the tea?
We're working towards developing a topical product that can be used on the skin.
Right. Very interesting. Okay. And when did you publish this study, by the way?
It was just recently published last month, but the research was done over, it has been done over the last couple of 5 years.
All right.
But it started about 10 years ago.
Very interesting. Let me perhaps give you an opportunity to ask any questions if you have. Dr. Isaac, Prof. Herbst, yes, no?
Yes, it will be very interesting to hear how well advanced the research has been to show whether it will be just a plain liquid that will be applied, or will it be in a cream form, spray on, or or haven't they developed anything in that direction yet?
Well,
how will
I
it
think
be applied?
she's looking forward to more development in that regard. Dr. Isaac, your thoughts?
I think it's a good idea because the inflammatory process is quite integral in the actual development of the cancer itself. So look, what they're looking at here is in the reduction of the inflammation after the sunburn episode or the sun exposure episode. The other thing is that if they could come up with some sort of topical that patients could apply in conjunction with their sunscreen, that'll be of a tremendous advantage.
Yeah. So Dr. McLeod, in terms of timelines now in the development, your thoughts? How long do you think it'll take? Yeah.
It's going to take quite some time because at the moment we're still in the early stages. We're working on the cells. Now, the next phase for us is to develop biomarkers that we can use on an animal model and then progress to clinical trials.
And is it possible then, I mean, I know that, Dr. Isaac referred to the after exposure. In terms of incorporating this into sunscreens as a preventative measure, perhaps, would that be something you're looking at?
We're looking at something that can be used after being exposed to the sun, something that you can apply on the skin after you've been exposed to the sun.
Right. I see. Well, very interesting. Perhaps let's continue the issue around prevention, and perhaps you have comments I know to make on the clip we played earlier.
I think the fact that we're sitting here discussing this topic itself goes a long way in educating the general public.
Right.
Shows like these were not readily available before. Our access to the internet was not as rife as it is now, with having essentially the access in your pocket with a smartphone. So from a prevention point of view, there are many things that you can do. One is to educate yourself. Look at the Skin Cancer website, the cancer website themselves, the Skin Cancer Foundation's website has got a lot of information on what the skin cancers are, what to look out for, and how to prevent them. But if I could put some points out directly to the public, you saw in that insert on the bathing costumes earlier on.
Right.
There are many South African companies that actually make very, very good quality UV protectant or UV resistant swimwear.
Right.
Now, you may also find that there are some swimsuits, for example, where a 5 or a 6-year-old is running around in a 2-piece bikini or a bathing suit that has got a swing tag attached to it that is not cancer approved, that says UV 50 plus or UV 100 on it.
Right.
The child's only covered 2 or 3% of the body surface.
Sure.
There's no way that product can actually provide you with the UV protection that it actually claims.
Right.
But the good quality ones that are cancer approved are usually tested both in the wet and in the dry.
Yeah.
They are also tested on new fabrics and on fabrics that have actually been weathered along the way.
Right.
Because the UV protection of the fabric makes a big difference as to whether it's actually new or old. Then you will find when you are out in the sunlight, apart from seeking the shade between 10 and 3, or when your shadow is shorter than your height, what you can also do is put on a hat. In Australia, you've got to go to school with a hat and long sleeves and the sunscreen. If your child does not pitch up at school with those items, the child's not allowed to play outdoors.
Let's talk about sunscreen for a moment. We have a variety of sunscreens available in this country. Is there some sort of guide in terms of what is effective, what is not effective?
Yes, I think what is effective that one can really talk about is try and look for the sunscreen that has got the CANSA SunSmart logo on it.
Right.
Because then there is evidence, because the Cancer Association tests these various sunscreens and they've got to comply with the very strict standards that have been set by CANSA, and we follow the best international practice as far as sunscreens are concerned.
Right.
But I'm not saying that sunscreens that don't carry the CANSA logo aren't good.
Is the SP factor important?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Right. And what should be the guide?
You'd be looking for a minimum of an SPF 30, but ideally, especially if you are outdoors on a regular basis or at the beach or by the pool, an SPF 50 plus is where you should be.
Okay. Then there's the issue of, municipal swimming pools or chlorinated swimming pools and the effect that these have on the skin. Any comment there?
I think with even your private swimming pool at home, I think the level of the chlorine, and that's where I think your question is aiming at, the level of the chlorine itself in a swimming pool is not necessarily conducive or a facilitating factor for the development of skin cancer. Yes, with regular swimming and the regular post-swim shower or bath, you may add to a bit of dryness of the skin, but that's about it. I don't think that the municipal swimming pools or beaches or private swimming pools for that matter actually aid or facilitate the skin cancer issue.
Okay. And if you jump into the pool after having applied sunscreen, what effect does that have on the sunscreen?
Well, if you're going to be in any sort of water environment or water sport environment, the fact that you've got moving water around you is going to wash off your sunscreen. Okay. And if you look at your sunscreen packaging very carefully, you do get those that have got a water-resistant label on them, or they may have a waterproof label upon them. Okay. In fact, there are a few sunscreens that are available, albeit a little bit more expensive. They can be sprayed onto the skin whilst the skin is wet.
Okay. Let's talk about, before we start talking about treatment, screening. How should people screen for skin cancer?
Well, I think the important thing is I always say to people, know your body. If you don't know your body, you won't know if there's anything different today than last week or last month. And this is particular importance as far as the skin is concerned. And yes, somebody mustn't be shy to stand in front of a full-length mirror and observe their body. And they can even turn their back and use a little hand mirror and check. But get your spouse, get your partner, get somebody to help you check, especially as far as the top of the head is concerned.
I believe there are cell phone apps now that can be used for that purpose.
Assist. I won't advocate them all the time, but I think with care, yes.
I think they can be a helpful tool to raise the suspicion even more.
Absolutely.
That is supposed to have you to then have it checked out by either a GP or a specialist.
Okay.
Not only apps regarding picking up suspicious moles, but there are also apps available that will assist you with a reminder to apply your sunscreen.
Right. Okay. We have about less than a minute left to talk treatment, because I don't want us leaving people with the idea that skin cancer, death sentence. Is there treatment for skin cancer?
Early diagnosis, early treatment, good chance of recovery.
Absolutely. I think if you look at, there are various forms of treatment, from applied or topical chemotherapy agents to surgical interventions to light interventions, are all available, and the outcomes are exceptionally good, especially if you have it picked up early, and there's usually no morbidity and mortality associated with it.
Well, Professor Michael Herbst, Health Specialist, Cancer Association of South Africa, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you for having me again.
And of course, Dr. Ishad Isak, dermatologist based in Johannesburg, thank you for your time.
It's a pleasure.
And of course, in our Cape Town studio, Dr. Tandega Unati Makbeba from University of Stellenbosch. Thank you so much for your contribution, and we're looking forward to that development of the topical Rooibos ointment or lotion or whatever it is. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, folks, it's on that note that we come to the end of our show today. Please remember, be sun smart. Okay. Join us again next week on SABC News. A reminder to please share your views and comments with us via our Facebook page, SABC Health Talk. And yes, send us those tweets at Twitter at SABC Health Talk. And remember that Health Talk is repeated every Saturday at 2 p.m. and Thursday morning at 5 a.m. I'm Dr. Stellenbosch. Thank you so much for watching. Please do take care.